Welcome to Beth's Happy Home. We're here today with my brother, Hugh Mitchell, Dr. Hugh Mitchell, I should say. And Hugh, what are your credentials?
Well, I got my bachelor's degree at Brigham Young University in molecular biology in 1996, I believe, 96. I went to graduate school at the Mayo Graduate School at the Mayo Clinic in Minnesota and graduated also there in molecular biology.
And your degree that you earned there was?
PhD in molecular biology. And then I went and did what's called a postdoctoral fellowship at also at the Mayo Clinic for a year, and then went to University of New Mexico and did another postdoctoral fellowship for 4 years, and then I kind of switched over to a kind of a more of a computer analysis, analytical sort of focus, where I got training in how to analyze data, and was there for another year or so, and then got a job at a respiratory research institute there in Albuquerque. And then I spent the last 10 years at the Pacific Northwest National Laboratory in Washington State, where I've just been doing data analysis all that time. And what I do is I try to make data that's in a very raw form and in a very massive form, make it into something that people can understand. The scientists who are actually using the data, they sometimes need help in interpreting it and really understanding, what happened in my experiment. It's just pages and pages of data I don't know how to interpret, so I try to make it understandable for them so that they can realize what's happening in their experiments.
Okay, so you don't have any financial interest or professional interest specifically in any company or industry that is going to be making money off of GMOs?
Not in the least.
Okay,
nope.
That's perfect, because that's what we're talking about today. We're going to talk about GMOs. So what is a GMO?
So GMO is kind of this charged term that gets thrown around a lot, but what it means is a genetically modified organism. And that is a plant or an animal that something has been changed in its genetic background that causes it to have a different trait or a different attribute that has some advantage, or it confers some good feature for that plant or animal.
So that's our understanding, or the way that we use the term, but technically the words could occur naturally, right?
Sure. I mean, genetic alterations happen all the time, and that's what kind of makes the world go round, is things change, and actually that's a good thing, because we want to be able to adapt to things. If suddenly it got colder or it got hotter, humans and animals and plants need to be able to adapt, and so genetic alterations naturally occur so that we can kind of adjust to the changes that we come across. So we want to be able to adjust to these changes.
Okay, so any kind of a mutation technically is a genetic modification.
Absolutely.
But
yeah.
the term GMO implies that man is manipulating it, right?
Right. That's
okay.
Right.
So how do scientists identify which genes they want to manipulate?
Well, that's a good question. But it really has a simple answer, because science and we've been doing science for many years, for centuries, and there really has now, as we have so much technology that's accumulated over the years and decades. We've just been able to build on a lot of information, and now we just know a lot of things about genes and what genes do what thing, and what functions we can assign to different genes in humans and in animals and plants and bacteria and viruses. We just have a lot of tools, and those tools have really enabled us to gather a lot of information. So at this point, you just name your favorite gene, and I can probably, find...
Vanderbilt.
There you go. That too. But I can just, you name a gene and I can look it up and say, oh, that gene has this function and that function, and it's actually thought to also maybe do this and that, and so we just have a lot of information. And so if we're interested in for example, introducing the ability to make vitamin A, we can go and find the genes and the proteins that actually will do that, and so that we just know, we just kind of have that information because of how much we've accumulated over the years.
So for those that don't have much of a background in it, you're talking about the DNA sequence that's in every single cell, and you unravel that enough to find the genes, the little segments of it that will direct that development, right?
Right.
So vitamin A, is there a practical application that you know of for vitamin A that you mentioned that?
Well, yeah, I mean, vitamin A, is something that we have to live.
Right, right.
And so we normally get it in our diet, and it's available in, carrots and, I don't know, I'm not a nutritionist, but
well, sweet potatoes.
Sweet potatoes, there you go.
Any deep colored fruit or vegetable, yeah.
Right, and so in struggling countries, these kinds of things are not necessarily available, and so it makes sense to be able to introduce and make foods available that have these essential vitamins that they aren't getting in their natural diet that they have access to.
Okay, so the main motive for doing GMOs is to make a plant or an animal that is going to be more effective in feeding the world or in resisting pests, or, what is the main thrust of the GMO effort?
Yeah, it's just an advantage to nutrition in general. It's an advantage to just the problem of world hunger. We have not solved the problem of world hunger at this point, and just making things more cost effective, making plants that are more and animal products that are more resistant to things that make them sick, bacteria, fungus, virus, we call those pathogens. Just making things work better, making them grow better so that we can make more of it at a lower cost. And all of this is going to just benefit mankind. In general.
Yeah.
Whenever we can do things cheaper and more efficiently and really in a safer way, then that's just going to benefit all of us. And it's just, it's really an amazing gift that we've been given, that the technology that we have can allow us to do these things.
Yeah, well, I would agree with you. I read an article once that was talking about a country in the Middle East where they produce a lot of wheat, and the wheat had been affected by a virus or a fungus, and I don't remember which it was, but it just decimated the crop. It just was lying flat. Except in the middle of the field, there were a few stalks that had not been infected with that.
Yeah.
And so the point of the article was that they were able to take those few stalks of wheat and find out, because they could unravel their genetics and compare them to the ones that were affected, and figure out which genes it was that gave those specific stalks the advantage so that they weren't killed by that pathogen, and then they were able to produce that seed and plant it in that infected field, and it would grow and be healthy, and so it rescued that entire country's wheat crop, in a generation, in one season they were able to fix it, and so that was so exciting to me, that this decimating thing had been overcome very readily just by applying the tools that God had given them, by those few surviving wheat stalks. It was really exciting.
That's a great example, because it's an example of how we can take advantage of natural processes, and this is kind of what I was talking about earlier with the genetic changes that just happen naturally, and this is why we need to be able to change our DNA at times so that we can adjust and adapt to these things that just come out and can wipe out a population of whatever it is, plants or animals or humans or whatever it is. And And that's what science can do with this technology and with these tools that we now have, where we can go and say, okay, so your example with the wheat, we can say, okay, here's the crop, here are the plants that died, and we can look at their DNA, and it's almost the same as the crops that lived, but here's changes right here and right here and right here, and then we can go and just investigate those changes, figure out what happened, and then introduce those genes into all of the current, a new strain of wheat, and maybe even make it better, make it even more resistant to the disease thing. And this is the kind of thing that we can do by introducing genes and making things better, making them work better. We can just do a lot of great things, amazing things.
Well, how is it done? How is it actually done? If I want to go make a GMO, how do I do it?
Well, you need a lot of money.
All right, I'm not doing it.
You and I are not going to do this, but yeah, it's actually really fascinating. So there's again, natural processes that have been discovered in bacteria. It's actually a very, very primitive immune system that bacteria have, or some bacteria have, where they recognize that over many generations, they've been able to see viruses that come in, and they've been able to develop this kind of simple immune system where they recognize that this invader is here, and they go and record the sequence of the invader's DNA, and they save it. And then when they see it again, there's a protein that can grab a hold of this sequence that they've saved and go and target the pathogen and erase its DNA. So then it can't do anything anymore. And so it's no longer a threat to the bacteria as long as it sees that same invader again. And so scientists, a few years ago, actually about 8 years ago, discovered this system in these bacteria, and they realized that this could be an amazing tool that we could harness. And so how it works is we say, okay, we want to introduce gene X, that, let's say it makes vitamin A, just for example. And we want to introduce it in, and so we're going to put that sequence of DNA that will cause, generation of vitamin A, just because we're talking about that.
Yeah.
We want to put that into this wheat or this rice or whatever it is. And so we attach it to this protein that has this special function that can match DNA that's already in the plant, and then line up with it because it matches, and then also bring in something else that gets introduced. And so it's a super cool system that we've discovered in a natural organism that we've learned how to harness. And then the way that gets delivered, or at least one example, is with something called a gene gun. And it's kind of just how it sounds.
A very tiny gun.
Very, very tiny gun. And it's on your little tiny bullets, which are heavy metal particles. You coat them with the DNA that you want to target into the plant, and you put it into this little chamber, with high pressure gas, and just blow it into the plant cells that can take it up.
So you actually use like a lead bullet.
It's very.
It's heavy metal.
They call it a gene gun for a good reason, because that's kind of what it is.
That's so interesting.
Yeah. So that's one method, the gene gun, and it literally blows the DNA into the plant cells. That's one approach. There's also what's called electroporation, where they zap the cells with an electric charge, and that pokes temporary holes in the surface of the cells, and the DNA can just kind of get in that way because it just has access. It just diffuses in. Yeah. Migrates in. And then there's chemical approaches that can also poke the same kind of holes where the DNA can just go in. But the gene gun, as you might imagine, is the best way. It seems to work the best. But there's also pathogens, or there are viruses that can be harnessed to deliver genes of interest as well. And so there's a lot of different options for how this can work. But then once the genes have been delivered into the cells, then they are grown in very controlled conditions, and and they're grown under conditions that select or encourage growth of cells that have received the genes.
Oh.
So maybe in a certain kind of nutrient mixture that can only allow the cells to grow that have received the gene, and all the other cells will be selected against and they'll die. And then only the ones that receive the genes will actually grow. So you kind of know these are the cells that received the genes. And then they're just carefully nurtured in very,
They
nurturing.
culture them like in a petri dish. Or how do you say the word?
Petri.
Petri. Petri.
Putri would be something else. I'm not sure what that would be. Probably not good. But,
Petri dish.
Petri dish, yeah. And so you don't do this to the seeds. You just do it to plant cells. And then, in the right conditions, these cells will actually grow into plants that then can be planted in the ground, and then they will generate seeds that will have the changes, that will have the new beneficial characteristics.
Wow.
So it's a very complicated process that requires a lot of skill and a lot of knowledge, but these are tools that we have that
I have
lots
a
of people
question.
can do.
So when you shoot that little segment of DNA into the cell, obviously it is so minusculely tiny that you can't target the specific spot in the chain. Does it just naturally attach to that spot because there's a vacancy there and that's where it matches?
Nope, it's harnessing that immune system mechanism where, so just a 30-second lesson on DNA and how it works is it is inherently able to pair with matching sequences. So you have if you have one strand of DNA, it can go and find its matching strand, and they'll pair up together.
So an opposite
strand, yeah. And it'll automatically, just like magnets, will automatically find each other eventually. It's kind of similar to that. You think of it as magnets, and if you put in the right sequence, then it'll just find the right place on the long stretch of DNA that's in the plant cell. It'll just go and find the target because of the sequence that you put in. It's like magic almost. It's not magic.
The hand of God, actually.
You could say it that way, but
His fingerprints.
But it's a process that we actually understand very well, and we can make it do what we want it to do so that we can get the beneficial result that helps everybody.
Wow.
It is really amazing.
Yeah, it is.
And it's, like I said, it's just, we've built upon knowledge, upon knowledge, upon knowledge, so that we're to this point where we can do these things, and we can do them effectively and really safely. I mean, it really is a very carefully planned process, and it really works in many cases very well.
Well, what about the dangers? Are there inherent things or risks? Talk to me about the risks of this process.
Yeah, so I mean, you can think of it. Walking out of your door is a risk, right? Getting out of your bed is a risk. I mean, meteor might come and knock your head off, or and I was thinking about this the other day, and just thinking about how people are sometimes afraid of risks, and sometimes those risks are so tiny that they really don't. Sometimes we just don't have it in perspective of how tiny the risk is. I mean, I could tell if I go to my kids like to throw rocks in the river or in the lake, and that's just something that I'm amazed how long my boys could spend throwing rocks in a lake. And I could sit down and think, you know what, this is risky, because there might be scuba divers in the lake that could rise up out of the lake just at the moment that my kids are throwing their rocks into the lake and hit them on the head. And that is a real risk. That could happen.
That is true. It could happen.
And so I could tell my kids, you cannot throw rocks in the lake because it's too risky. There is a risk associated with that. But that risk is so tiny that it doesn't make sense to tell them not to, when that's something that they love to do and that gives them joy and whatever. And same with driving a car. You can say, well, I might get in an accident, so I'm not going to drive my car to work and support my family. You can say that, and there is a risk, and it's a significant risk with driving a car. And the same with GMOs. there is a risk, just like doing anything else. And it's the same risk that you would encounter if you were just breeding apple trees or breeding, pea plants or anything else. You don't know for sure what will happen when you cross-pollinate this strain of apple tree with that strain of apple tree. You might make something poisonous. How likely is that? It's astronomically small that would cause something dangerous to happen. And this is the kind of risk that we're talking about. When we're talking about, are GMOs, is there a risk associated with GMOs? Well, yeah, but breathing is a risk.
Being alive. Yeah.
Being alive is a risk. I mean, there might be poison gas released suddenly, and we might be breathing it. So breathing is a risk. It's a risk I'm willing to take.
Well, so you're saying that because it is part of nature, we're manipulating nature, scientists are manipulating natural processes, that because it is existing in our mortal world, that it has the same risk of any part of living and life, that there isn't any. Is there any evidence that there have been negative effects that have been put into our food supply, or and is there any motive why a company that stood to make money might introduce something that was harmful? How careful are they? Do you know?
Well, I know. Like we carefully established at the beginning, I have no financial interest in any company, but common sense requires that any company that's going to spend the resources and the time and just all of the work that involves generating some of these products, if they're going to release it, then they're going to make darn sure that it's safe, because
and it's good
and
for
it's
you.
good and it works and it is valuable. And the idea that they would purposefully generate something that's harmful is hard to contemplate. What motivation they would have. It would be nothing but their
suicide,
financial suicide.
Yeah. Okay, well, so Hugh, give me an example of a crop that has been genetically engineered to become very superior and that we might know about.
Okay, yeah, well, I am not a plant person, so I'm not an expert on the processes that goes on in generating these kind of things. But one example that I do know of that we've kind of been mentioning before was this idea of generating a product that produces its own vitamin A in a way that it normally would not, and that's the golden rice, which is been engineered to produce fairly high amounts of vitamin A. So vitamin A deficiency is actually a huge problem in the world. We're talking about world hunger and world nutrition, and there are hundreds of thousands of I was just reading the other day, there are hundreds of thousands of children that die every year because they don't have enough vitamin A. And this is something that has been addressed. This problem has been recognized, and they have generated a strain of white rice that actually generates fairly high amounts of its own vitamin A, to the point that it changes the color of the rice. White rice is you might guess, white. The production of vitamin A makes it kind of a bright yellow. It's kind of a beautiful color.
Well, that's carrots and everything with vitamin A has that
this
intense
orangey
color.
kind of color. Yeah.
Sweet potatoes are high in vitamin A.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And so this potentially, and we can produce this at a very low cost. Once it's developed, once, it's just seeds. Once the plant has been produced that can produce this vitamin A, then you have seeds and you can grow seeds and you can just generate huge amounts of this rice, just like we can grow lots and lots of white rice.
Yeah.
And so this is a great opportunity to solve a big problem with world nutrition and in struggling countries. But yet, the fact that this is a GMO has gotten out, and there's been huge resistance to golden rice. And there have been fields of golden rice destroyed because there are certain groups out there that have decided that this is just not something that we can do. This is just a bad thing. And frankly, I don't understand what the mindset is, because this is an obvious win for mankind. The tragedy of that is just kind of mind-blowing. I mean, there's resistance to this when this is a win. I mean, this is a huge success for science, because it kind of opens the door to all kinds of other things that we can do. And of course, for people who are struggling with nutrition and really literally are dying because they don't have this critical nutrient.
Yeah, that's heartbreaking. And you have to assume that the people that are protesting, or destroying that rice, they simply are ignorant.
Yeah.
They're afraid of it because they don't understand it.
That's a good point. Yeah, it's not malicious, and it's important that we acknowledge that this is people who are well-meaning, most likely, that are opposing it. But just because they don't understand, they just don't understand what's going on here.
Well, and it's ironic that you use that particular example, because white rice itself, which, much of the world has a lot of their diet based on white rice, is pretty low in nutrition. By the time you polish off the bran, there's not much
just
left
carbs.
but starch. Yeah.
Yep.
And so if you can put some vitamins into that, that's going to be a big improvement on something that naturally is not that great. Well, naturally, when you're eating the brown rice with the, the germ and the bran on it, it's a lot better, and it has vitamins in it that it doesn't have once it's polished off. But most countries in the world don't eat it that way. And so if you can put the vitamins into the rice, the kernel, the starchy part of it, then it's going to be a huge benefit, that people would actually accept it in their diet too, and it would be an appealing color as well, so.
It'd be fun.
Yeah. Make confetti colored rice,
Right. Rainbow rice.
Cross it with beets next.
There you go.
And then you're going to get all kinds of good things. Well, I think it's fantastic. I really appreciate your giving us some really good insight into how it works and how it's done, and that, it really is just a wonderful gift that we've been given, that we can look inside the DNA and figure out how to make things better, It kind of harkens back in my mind to when Adam and Eve were cast out of the garden, and he said, and the Lord told them, by the sweat of your brow you shall earn your bread, all the days of your life. Well, this is kind of part of that, sweat of your brow, earn your bread,
Figure it out
now
a little bit at a time. Now you got to figure it out, yeah. Yep.
And he's given us, mankind, this huge technology to make life better and to solve the problems. If our hearts are in the right place, we can solve those problems in the world. And so it's important, and that's why we wanted to do this video, because it's important that this wonderful gift not be thwarted just because people don't understand it. So we appreciate Hugh coming and filling us in, enlightening us, and we thank you for watching.
Bye-bye.